Some memories don't fade, they ferment. Grow sharper with age until they burn on the tongue like cheap liquor you never wanted to taste again. My name is Richard, and I'm 30 now, but when I close my eyes, I'm still 12. I'm still standing under the buzzing fluorescence of that gas station lot, clutching a candy bar I couldn't afford, watching my parents' tail lights vanish like a pair of falling stars you can't catch. It was August. The air was thick and restless, the way it always gets before school begins. We had just returned from one of those so-called family bonding road trips my mother insisted on, though in our house, bonding meant pretending my father's tirades were scripture, and my older brother James's shallow musings deserved applause. I was the quiet one, the soft-spoken shadow at the edge of the frame, invisible until I made a mistake. That day, my mistake was a spilled soda, a fizz of Sprite soaking into the backseat fabric. James, already fluent in cruelty at 16, grinned and shrugged. He did it on purpose, he told Dad, eyes glittering with the thrill of betrayal. The SUV slowed, blinkers flashing as it pulled into a station just off the highway. My father's jaw worked like a vice. His voice was steel when he turned to me. "You're not a child anymore. You want to play grown-up? Find your own way home." At first I laughed, a brittle, hopeful laugh. One of his warped lessons, I thought. But then the back hatch slammed shut. Tires screamed, and the car became taillights shrinking into blackness. I ran, shouted their names until my voice split in my throat. The roar of engines drowned me out. The silence that followed was worse. A clerk leaned from the station doorway, cigarette dangling, and gave me the kind of look people save for strays left behind on highways. When I asked for help, he barely moved his lips. "Ain't a daycare, kid." Then he shut the door. That night, I curled behind the dumpster, every passing headlight making my heart stutter. 80 miles from home, no money, no phone, nothing but the raw pulse of fear and the certainty that some part of me, trust, maybe, or hope, was freezing solid. At dawn, I found a payphone and dialed the only adult who had ever seemed to notice me. Mrs. Linda, my English teacher. Her car smelled faintly of lavender when she picked me up, but her hands gripped the wheel too tightly. I told her my parents must have forgotten me. She didn't argue, didn't say what her eyes already betrayed. She just drove me back, made sure I ate, and whispered, "You can always call me." When I walked through our front door, no one looked up in alarm. No one asked where I'd been. Mom barely lifted her gaze from her laptop. "Took you long enough." James, controller in hand, smirked without looking at me. "Should have run faster." And my father, he simply nodded at me the next morning, as if nothing had happened at all. That was the day I stopped trying to belong. High school blurred after that. I haunted hallways like a ghost, eating lunch in silence, my footsteps swallowed by the crowd. The moment I turned 18, I vanished. 3 jobs, community college, then a transfer across the country. I never left a forwarding address. I changed my number. For the first time, I inhaled air that didn't carry their voices. The years stretched. I built a quiet life, became a software engineer, moved to a city where no one weaponized words like "man up." I gathered friends who called me loyal, steady. I adopted Max, a nervous little rescue mutt who flinches at raised voices. We understand each other, he and I. I never expected to hear from them again. But last week an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. Dramatic, curling loops only my mother used. Inside, James's wedding invitation. Gold lettering pressed into heavy paper, loud in its fake elegance. And tucked inside, a folded page torn from a notebook. "Richard, we know things have been distant, but James is getting married, and it would mean a great deal to the family if you could come. He asked us to reach out to you personally. We hope you'll come. We'd love to reconnect." Their words stared back at me, syrupy and hollow. Mom and Dad, writing as though nothing had ever happened. As though they hadn't left me behind a gas station dumpster at 12 years old, shrinking into myself as strangers walked past. As though James wasn't the untouchable golden boy, his every cruelty polished into charm while I was told to stay in his shadow. The note trembled between my fingers. For a long time, I just sat there staring. My grip tightened until the paper crinkled, until I imagined it dissolving to dust in my hands. I almost threw it into the trash. Almost. But then, I hesitated. The invitation itself was all ostentation. An embossed venue name, vineyard ceremony, black tie dress code. Even a QR code to RSVP as though I were no more than some distant cousin. Disposable the way they'd always treated me. It would mean a lot to the family. That line stopped me. Because I wasn't the same kid they abandoned on the shoulder of a highway. And if they wanted me back in their perfect portrait, well, I had some ideas about how to paint myself in. No, I didn't RSVP, not right away. Instead, I began to plan. Quietly. Carefully. Because some debts aren't settled with apologies. They're settled with presence. Sometimes the loudest revenge is simply showing up. When my eyes found her name, Susan, in graceful cursive, I understood the scale of the performance. This wasn't just a wedding, this was spectacle. The Kensingtons had long been local royalty, their old money and older grudges woven into every whisper of my hometown. I remembered Susan faintly from school. 15, already walking like she had a crown balanced on her head, always dressed for an interview, polished in ways the rest of us couldn't fake. The sort of girl who never asked for attention because the world offered it on a silver tray. So of course James had landed her, the charming eldest son. Quarterback grin, the center of our parents' universe. Their pride, their jewelry, their proof of success. That night I looked her up online. Nothing surprising. A curated life. Dental school graduate. Instagram filtered in soft golds. Cappuccinos with hearts and foam. Engagement photos staged beneath a tree plucked from a bridal magazine. Her post tagged the wedding website and curiosity dragged me there. Welcome to James and Susan's big day. A countdown ticked toward 3 weeks. Venue, Stonebrook Vineyard and Lodge. Registry, Bloomingdale's Crate and Barrel, Amazon. Dress code, black tie optional. Shuttles, itineraries, a script for the perfect weekend. We are so excited to celebrate with friends and family. Family, right. There was even a love story page, written from James's perspective, or at least polished until it gleamed like PR copy. I always believed in fate, but nothing prepared me for Susan. Her grace, her kindness, the way she looked at me and saw more than just the guy I used to be. I read that line 3 times. More than the guy you used to be. And I remembered. The boy who pushed me into the pond at my 12th birthday while guests laughed and parents applauded his wit. The boy who lied with angelic ease said I slipped while I trudged home dripping, cake uneaten. That boy was still inside him. He hadn't changed. He'd only gotten better at rewriting his history. That was when my hesitation hardened into resolve. I hadn't planned to attend, not until I saw his carefully staged mythology. The past, scrubbed clean. No collateral damage acknowledged. Me erased. If they wanted to play family again, I would play my part. But on my terms, I didn't click the RSVP link. Too easy, too traceable. Instead, I called in a favor from an old friend, Jenny, who worked in logistics. Within days, a midnight blue suit arrived, custom-fitted, sharp as glass. A vest cut with the elegance of a Bond film, the kind of thing that would make them blink twice. I booked a room at the guest hotel listed on the website, paid in advance under a slightly altered name. They wouldn't know I was coming, not yet. Let them think they'd buried me in silence. I was already on my way back. Not yet. That was the phrase circling in my mind. If they wanted to bury the past, I'd let them taste their own medicine, play along with their amnesia. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sent a single email to the RSVP address. Simple. Polite. Looking forward to the celebration. Please don't mention I'll be attending. I'd like it to be a surprise. Signed, Richard. No reply, just the confirmation that it had been read. The week leading up to the wedding, I stripped life down to essentials. Cleared my schedule, left Max with a sitter, packed light, one suit, one polished pair of shoes, and one photograph. Folded, frayed at the edges, me at 12 years old, a backpack slung over my shoulders, blank eyes staring outside that gas station. Mrs. Linda had taken it the morning she found me. Years later, she mailed me the print with a note. You survived. I hadn't decided what I'd do with it yet, but I knew it had to come with me. When I arrived at Stonebrook Vineyard the day before the wedding, it looked less like a venue and more like a stage set. Rolling green hills, timber beams polished to a gloss, fairy lights woven through arches like 1,000 watching eyes. Perfect weather, perfect people. The kind of curated charm that knows exactly who doesn't belong. The rehearsal dinner spilled across the terrace. I lingered at the edge, sunglasses shielding my eyes, jacket draped over my arm. For a moment I was invisible. Then I saw her. Mom. She looked smaller than I remembered, as though air had leaked slowly from her frame. Her dyed reddish-brown hair caught the light unnaturally, and pearls clung to her throat, clashing with the sunburn on her chest. She laughed that brittle laugh of hers, the one that always sounded like it was cracking under its own weight. Beside her was Dad, same stiff blazer, and I could almost hear the snap of his old money clip opening in his hand, the way he used to flash it like proof of his divinity. His face had softened in a puffy, weary way, as though life had finally stopped taking orders from him. They were locked in polite battle with Susan's parents, smiles sharp, handshakes practiced, voices drenched in praise for James. The same performance I'd grown up gagging on. I didn't approach, not yet. Then James turned. Our eyes met across the terrace, and for the first time in nearly 20 years, I saw his smile falter. Just for an instant. The flicker was there, quick as a match strike. What the hell is he doing here? He masked it fast, raised his glass, let his eyes pass over me as if I were a stranger. But I knew better. More importantly, now I knew. He hadn't told them I was coming. I slipped away before the toast, pulse hammering, adrenaline buzzing like static through my hands. They trembled slightly, not from fear, never fear, but from anticipation. They had asked me back into the fold. They wanted family again. I was about to redefine the word for them, and I hadn't even spoken yet. The morning of the wedding came veiled in mist. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling hotel window, watching fog drift across the vineyard like smoke from some slow-burning fire. I hadn't slept. Not from nerves, from memory. The pavement behind the gas station, Mrs. Linda's tight grip on the wheel, the soundless breakfast the morning I returned home. They replayed in my head in ghostly silence, sharper than film reels. I ironed my shirt with deliberate precision, pressing every crease flat like scars being smoothed beneath my hands. Then I reached for the photograph. Folded, faded. 12-year-old me staring into the middle distance, eyes wide with the kind of fear that etches itself into bone. I slid it into my breast pocket behind a silk square, resting against my chest like a second heart. The shuttle to the vineyard filled quickly. Distant cousins, half-forgotten neighbors, Susan's friends from college. The air inside was thick with chatter, compliments about the decor, the view, the dress they hadn't yet seen. Their voices blurred into background noise. No one knew who I was. And that was perfect. No one turned their head when I stepped off the shuttle, and I preferred it that way. Better to move unseen. The grounds had transformed overnight into something immaculate. White chairs lined up across the lawn like rows of dominoes waiting to topple. A floral arch rose at the center, heavy with ivory roses and pale greenery, every petal arranged like it had been chosen by a god of symmetry. Soft strings drifted through the air while servers moved among the crowd, handing out glasses of Prosecco as though it were liquid sunlight. It was flawless, calculated, and utterly foreign. I stayed near the back, watching. My parents sat in the front row, performing. Mom cradled a bouquet of lilies that looked borrowed, her painted smile stretched thin. Dad laughed too loudly at something the officiant said, his voice booming like an engine tuned to impress. Beside them, James shone in his tuxedo, speaking with his best man as though the world were simply a mirror held up to his good fortune. Susan hadn't appeared yet. That was when she found me. An older woman approached, elegant in navy blue, silver hair swept into a chignon. She studied me with calm curiosity before offering a polite smile. "You must be Richard." I blinked, startled. "I am." "I'm Rebecca, Susan's mother." "Of course." I straightened, extended a hand. She took it, graceful but with eyes that searched, measuring. "James told us you might be here," she said. "I wanted to thank you for coming." My guard went up instantly. "He told you?" She nodded, her smile pulling tighter. "He mentioned there'd been some distance, but he hoped this would be a step toward healing." The laugh clawed up my throat, bitter, but I swallowed it. Instead, I said evenly, "He's an optimist." She gave a small, awkward smile before excusing herself, her heels sinking slightly into the grass as she retreated. So James had told Susan's family, but not mine. Interesting. The ceremony unfolded in choreographed perfection. Music swelled, guests shifted, and then Susan appeared, glowing, poised, the picture of what every guest expected. A hush fell across the lawn as she moved down the aisle, every head turning in reverence. James waited at the arch, smiling the smile of a man about to be crowned. I watched it all from the back row, silent. The vows were quick, polished, rehearsed. Nervous laughter whispered "I do's," applause swelling like a tide. And just like that, they were bound. Husband and wife. The reception was where the seams began to pull. It sprawled inside a glass-walled hall that overlooked the vineyard. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, scattering light across orchids and floating candles at every table. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, leaned in close over calligraphy-printed place cards. Mine didn't exist. I wandered casually toward the family table. An empty chair sat beside my parents. The card read, "Reserved for family." Mom's eyes flicked up, wine glass in hand. "Oh, you made it." She didn't rise. "Apparently." Dad leaned back in his chair, eyes unreadable, as though weighing whether to acknowledge me at all. "I didn't see a card," I said quietly. Mom shrugged, lips pursed. "Must have been a mistake. Maybe you're at one of the other tables. We didn't handle the seating." "Sure you didn't." Laughter rose all around us, the hum of celebration swallowing the edges of our exchange. I scanned the room, and there he was, James, surrounded by Susan and two older men in tuxedos. He excused himself the moment his gaze met mine. He came straight toward me. "Hey," he said, his voice pitched low, private. "Glad you could make it." "No thanks to you." He exhaled, shifting. "Look, I didn't think you'd actually show, but you invited me. I asked Mom and Dad to send it." "That's different." His jaw flexed. "I figured you'd see it, toss it, move on. Like you always do." I studied him. Tan, polished, confident, every inch the man who'd never had to bleed for silence, never carried the weight of being forgotten. "I came," I said softly, "to see if you remembered." His brow furrowed. "Remember what?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my jacket. The photo unfolded in my hand. The 12-year-old me, backpack hanging, eyes blank and wide beneath the fluorescent glow of a gas station. I held it up between us, letting silence press in like a knife. James's face shifted, not dramatically, but enough to betray him. His gaze flicked from the photo to my eyes, then back down. He swallowed hard, like something had lodged in his throat. "That was a long time ago." I nodded slowly. "Yes, and you never said a word. Never told them to turn back. Never made sure I even made it home." He scanned the room as though he could summon some kind of escape. "Richard, it was one night. You were always dramatic." I thought you were past this. Something inside me went cold. I met his gaze unflinching. I'm not here to ruin your wedding, I said quietly. But you can relax. He gave a tight, hollow laugh, but it was empty, hollow, like he knew exactly what was coming. Good, but I'm staying for the speeches. I studied him for a moment, watching the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was trying to size me up. I wasn't bluffing. The best revenge, after all, is never noisy. It's deliberate. Surgical. I had a toast prepared, one they'd never forget. The room dimmed as waiters cleared the last of the dinner plates. The buzz of champagne-induced chatter flowed over the guests, some settling back in their seats with full stomachs, others moving slowly to the music of the jazz band tucked in the corner. James and Susan sat at the head table, their names etched in gold behind them, everything polished and shining. An image of perfection, meant to dazzle. A man in a pale blue suit tapped his glass. The chatter immediately stopped. Now it's time for a few words from those who know the bride and groom best. Polite applause. Then Susan's father stood to speak, his voice smooth and practiced, laced with the warmth of wealth and privilege. He spoke of Susan's childhood, her dreams, her first mention of James. He cracked a joke about James's charm, how no one had realized he was marrying up. The crowd chuckled, but it was shallow, rehearsed. Next, James's best man stood, delivering the standard speech. Lighthearted, funny, filled with anecdotes from their college days, James's inability to cook, and how fortunate he was to have found Susan. The crowd laughed again, polite and expected, no edges to the words. Then the MC took the mic once more, eyes flicking to his notes. And now a special toast from Richard. The room fell silent. My parents froze mid-sip. James's jaw tensed. Susan blinked, her face betraying confusion as I stood. I moved slowly to the microphone, letting every eye in the room fall upon me. Some guests whispered. A few glanced around, puzzled, unsure of who I was or why I was speaking. I tapped the mic once. The sound cut through the quiet. Good evening, I said, my voice steady, clear. I'm Richard, James's younger brother. The room shifted. Murmurs rippled through the guests. He has a brother? I wasn't sure I'd come tonight, I continued, voice calm, every word measured. In fact, I spent the last few weeks debating whether I should. You see, I haven't spoken to my family in 18 years, and not the quiet kind of silence, the kind that chokes the air out of the room. The tension in the room tightened. Eyes darted between me and my parents. I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of my words sink in. I got a wedding invitation out of nowhere. No phone call, no email, just a card with a note that said, "It would mean a lot to the family if you came." I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the photo and held it up, letting the image of a 12-year-old me stare back at the room. This is me at 12 years old. I let the photo hang in the air, the crowd leaning in, drawn to the revelation. It was taken the morning after my parents left me at a gas station, 80 miles from home. I had spilled a soda in the car, and instead of scolding me, they left, told me to figure it out. A shiver passed through the room, the clink of a wine glass being set down. They didn't come back. They didn't even call. I spent the night behind a dumpster. The only reason I made it home was because a teacher picked me up the next day. I let the words breathe in the silence. And I never received an apology. Not from my parents, not from James. I let the weight of the silence fill the room, drawing everyone in. I held my gaze steady on my parents. Mom's face was drained of color, her lips parted as though trying to summon a response, but finding herself speechless. Dad's face was a mask of shame, his expression unreadable. And until this wedding invitation arrived, I said softly, I thought they were perfectly happy pretending I didn't exist. I paused again, feeling the tension, the thickening air, like everyone was holding their breath. Now, I'm not here to ruin anyone's evening. But in that moment, I had already made my mark. I spoke again, but this time my words were more deliberate, measured. Susan, you seem lovely. Your family's been gracious, welcoming. And James, well, you've always known how to put on a good show. That one landed sharp and true. His expression cracked for a split second, his composure slipping before he quickly regained control. But I think weddings are supposed to be about honesty, about truth. And the truth is, I couldn't stand here tonight pretending we were ever close, or that I grew up in a house where family meant anything more than survival. The room fell absolutely silent. You could feel the tension, thick and suffocating. I wasn't here to be part of a happy family narrative. I wasn't here to smile and pretend. I was a placeholder, a brother-shaped prop to complete the picture. I turned to James. So, here's my gift to you. I placed the photo gently on the head table, right in front of him. A reminder of what family really looks like when you walk away from it. Then I turned on my heel and walked away from the mic. There was no applause, just the stunned quiet of people trying to process what had just happened. A few gasps echoed through the room. As I passed my parents' table, I heard my mother's sharp whisper of my name, barely audible, as if calling me back might somehow undo what had been said. My father moved to rise, but I didn't pause. I didn't look back. I exited through the side door and into the cool night air. The music now felt like it came from another world, distant and irrelevant. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trembling. I was free. But freedom is strange. It doesn't always arrive with peace. Sometimes it just leaves a hollow silence behind, a silence that makes you wonder where it all goes from here. The drive back to the hotel was quiet. No music, no clinking of glasses, no forced laughter filling the air. Just the soft hum of the tires on gravel and the steady thrum of my thoughts catching up with the aftermath. I didn't go back to my room right away. Instead, I wandered down one of the vineyard trails behind the hotel, the rows of dark grapevines stretching out beneath the moonlight. Each step felt like it was unwinding the tension in my chest, loosening the knot that had been there for so long. I could still hear my mother's gasp, see James's perfectly composed mask crack for just a moment. I could still feel the stares of strangers trying to figure out the family member who had been deliberately erased from the picture. For most of my life, I had been the ghost in my own family. But tonight, I reminded them I was here. I was alive. I was memory. And memory is a powerful thing, especially when the people around you need to forget. Back at the hotel, a voicemail awaited me. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Richard, it's Susan." Her voice was quiet, controlled, but tinged with something fragile. "I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect this. I just wanted to say, I'm not angry with you. You said what you needed to say, and I'm sorry." The message ended abruptly, and there was no contact information. That was the first apology I'd received in 18 years, and it didn't even come from my family. The next morning, I left early. No breakfast, no drawn-out goodbyes. Just a quick email to the front desk to cancel the rest of my stay and settle the bill. I didn't want to stay and watch the fallout unfold. I knew them too well. My parents would pretend nothing happened or twist it into some kind of misunderstanding. James would likely spin it too. But I knew one thing for sure. The photo was still on the head table when I left. I kept the suit, tossed the tie, and I left. When I arrived home, my apartment felt like a place of refuge. Max greeted me with unrestrained joy, his tail wagging like he'd been waiting for me all night. Then, unexpectedly, people started reaching out. First, it was Hannah, my cousin. She messaged me on LinkedIn, telling me she'd heard about the speech from someone at the wedding. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I should have asked where you went after you disappeared. I always thought it was odd how no one ever mentioned you, but I assumed it wasn't my place to ask." We chatted for a while. She asked if I'd be open to a visit. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. Then came Mrs. Linda's message. She still remembered. She still had the photo she took. And for the first time in 18 years, I didn't feel invisible. "I often wondered where you ended up," she wrote. I'm so proud of you, Richard. I hadn't cried in years, but that night the tears came. It wasn't a loud, guttural sob, just a soft, aching release, like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. It was the kind of release that comes when the weight finally lifts and you can breathe again. Slowly, everything started to shift. My sleep improved. I woke up earlier. I found a rhythm I hadn't known in years. Work became easier, my code more fluid. I began taking Maxon on longer walks, feeling the wind on my face, hearing the quiet hum of the world around me. I started writing again, short stories, essays, anything to clear the storm inside my head. The days felt heavy still, but they were beginning to make sense. A week later, an email arrived from a woman who worked for a nonprofit focused on helping marginalized adults, those abandoned, rejected, or cut off from their families. She had heard about my wedding speech through a friend of a friend who attended the event. She described it as the quietest, most powerful thing she had ever heard. She asked if I would consider speaking at one of their retreats, not as a professional speaker, but simply as someone who had lived through it. I agreed. What began as a single event soon grew into 2, then 4. Then came an invitation to participate in a university symposium on family estrangement and trauma recovery. I didn't wear a suit for those, just a casual shirt, jeans, and sometimes a blazer if I wanted to look more put together. But I always carried the photograph with me. I'd show it when I spoke, recounting the truth, just as it had happened. No embellishments, just the raw facts. Each time someone would approach me afterward and say, "That's my story too," I thought I was alone. The voice they once called too soft, too timid, too gentle had finally found its resonance. It wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was power. With every person I helped, every shared story, every handshake, I could feel it. This quiet, growing certainty. James, with his new wife and pristine reputation, had no idea the ripple I'd set into motion. He didn't realize I was just getting started. It was only a matter of time before someone from their side came looking for answers. It began with another email from Susan. But this time, it wasn't short, polite, or carefully phrased. This message was raw. "Richard, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did your parents really leave you like that?" At 12, I had asked James. He didn't deny it. He simply said, "It's complicated. But your story didn't sound complicated. You spoke with a clarity that came from carrying something heavy for too long. If it's true, I need to understand more. Please." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keys. Susan could have dismissed it all, brushed me off as bitter or unstable, written me off as just another casualty of family drama. But she didn't. She asked for the truth, and I wasn't going to waste that. So I replied, "No theatrics, no embellishments, just the simple, painful truth." I told her about the gas station, the silence when I returned, how I worked my way through school, how my name disappeared from their lives like I had never existed, how the family photo was altered, edited to erase me as if I were some inconvenient detail. I didn't expect her to take sides. I didn't ask her to. I just shared what had happened and left it at that. The next day, she wrote back, "I believe you. They never told me. James said he was an only child until we got engaged. They erased you, and now I'm wondering what else they've rewritten. Would you be willing to meet for coffee?" Just the two of us. It was like seeing a crack form in glass that had always been pristine. I knew better than to rush her. I agreed, letting her set the time and place. A week later, we met in a small cafe 2 towns away from James and Susan's home. She wore no makeup, no pearls, none of the bridal polish. Just a hoodie and jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. She didn't greet me with small talk, no pleasantries. She sat down, took a breath, and simply asked, "What else did they do?" I leaned forward, my hands clenched tightly, and said, "Not everything. Not the little humiliations, the 1,000 cuts that no one else ever noticed." But the big things, there were the small betrayals. Like when my mother failed to remember my birthday 2 years in a row, only to turn it around and blame me for not reminding her. Or when my father, tight-lipped and cold, refused to co-sign a modest student loan, dismissing me with, "You'll just squander it." And yet, he handed James $5,000 without a second thought for a trip to Cancun. Susan's hands never moved from her mug, her fingers curled tightly around it. She listened, quiet and focused, absorbing everything without judgment. She didn't try to defend them, didn't interrupt. She simply sat, her attention fixed on me. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice hesitant. "At the wedding, they called you a ghost," she said slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. "James said you disappeared when you were a teenager. He said you were always a little dramatic." I blinked, the word ghost catching me off guard. It felt like a cold slap. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. I chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "They didn't lose a son," I said quietly, my voice edged with something sharper than I expected. "They buried one." The air between us thickened, the silence stretching. Susan leaned forward, her eyes wide with concern, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know what terrifies me most?" She didn't wait for me to reply, her words almost a confession. I stayed silent, letting the moment settle. She exhaled softly, then whispered, "What if they do the same to our kids someday?" There it was, the tipping point. The doubt planted in her mind, the realization that James had never once questioned the past. And now he never would. Susan stood up suddenly, her face a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. She muttered that she needed space, that she wasn't ready to talk to him yet, but that she would reach out when she was. 3 days passed before the letter came. It arrived without a return address, just like the last one. But this time, the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's. Inside was a brief, rigidly scrawled note, almost angrily formed in uneven letters. "Richard, I don't know what you think you're doing. This isn't helping anyone. You're only bringing shame to the family. Let it go. If you keep making trouble, there will be consequences. We gave you a second chance to be part of things. Don't make us regret it. No apology. No acknowledgement of pain. Just a thinly veiled threat wrapped in self-righteousness." I sat there, staring at the words. I could feel my pulse quicken as the anger simmered beneath the surface, but I didn't let it surface. I placed the letter next to the photo of me at 12, the boy they had discarded. Two symbols of the same painful truth. And then I smiled. Not in joy, but in quiet triumph. Finally, I had the evidence I needed. His own words, his own handwriting, confirming who he was, who they had always been. I scanned the letter and saved it, not just in one place, twice, in 2 separate cloud drives. Then I took a deep breath and dialed a number I'd kept for just such an occasion. The journalist I'd met at the symposium picked up on the first ring. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse raced. "But I don't just want to talk, I want to show them." There was a pause, a subtle shift in her tone when she spoke next. "How far are you willing to go?" she asked. I looked down at the letter, at the photograph of me, the name on the invitation that had tried to erase me, at everything they had tried to bury. "All the way," I replied. The article titled "Left Behind," one man's silent escape from a family that tried to erase him, went live on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had spread like wildfire. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments. Kimberly, the journalist, had done her due diligence. She'd confirmed every detail. She interviewed Mrs. Sandra, cross-checked the gas station incident, and even spoke with my old landlord, who vouched for my self-reliance through school. The piece included the photo of me at 12, standing near a dumpster with worn-out sneakers and a torn backpack. It featured quotes from my wedding speech, the letter from my father, slightly blurred to protect his identity, and Susan's confirmation of our conversation. Kimberly was meticulous. No sensationalism, No exaggeration, just the plain, unvarnished truth. And that was the secret to its power. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was simply honest. Comments flooded in. Many people shared their own stories of being cast aside, of the pain of being replaced, silenced, or written out of their own lives. Others praised the restraint I'd shown, the quiet dignity of my speech at the wedding. A few even tried to guess which vineyard the event had taken place at, though I never confirmed. What mattered most were the private messages that flooded my inbox. Dozens of people, strangers, reaching out, some sharing their own stories of being erased, abandoned, forgotten. But the one that struck the hardest came from Susan's older brother, Nicholas. His message was blunt, no beating around the bush. I always thought James was fake. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. Now I understand why. I'm sorry for what they did to you. My parents are furious, not with you, but with James. They feel like they've been lied to. Used. That's all the message said. They're meeting with Susan today. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't respond. No need to. Just 2 days later, another email arrived from Susan. Richard, I read the article. I saw all the comments. I showed James. He exploded. He said you blindsided him. Said you twisted everything to make it worse than it was, but you didn't. You didn't even tell the whole truth, and that's when I knew. You're telling the truth. He asked me to choose. I've made my choice. I'm staying with my parents for now. The marriage is being annulled. I'm sorry for how this all went down, but thank you for not letting me be blind to the truth. I read the message 3 times, each time trying to let the words sink in. Then I shut my laptop and sat there in silence, the stillness wrapping around me. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't savoring a win. I was remembering. Remembering being 12, standing in the hallway of my childhood home, clutching a candy bar I bought at a gas station, convinced they would return. They have to. They'll come back. But here I was, nearly 20 years later, and the family who had cast me aside was finally facing the consequences of their carefully built lies. They had lost control of the narrative. It wasn't over, though. Not yet. 3 days after the article was published, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. It was my mother's voice, but something was off. There was no sadness in it, only a seething anger. Richard, how dare you? We invited you. We tried to be civil, and you humiliated us. You've ruined James's life. Susan's parents are threatening legal action over the gifts, the deposits, the ruined reputation. Do you think this is justice? It's cruelty. Vindictive, petty cruelty. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope you're happy. And then my father's voice came through the line. It wasn't angry, but it carried an exhaustion, like he had already resigned himself to whatever came next. You've always been too soft. I should have known you'd grow up into the kind of person who could turn a moment into a weapon. Congratulations. You've destroyed the family. Don't ever contact us again. He hung up before I could say anything. I stared at the wall, waiting for their words to sink in, to feel the sting of everything they'd said. But it didn't come. I didn't feel the sharp ache I had once known when they spoke to me like this. Because the truth was, they hadn't destroyed me. They had destroyed the part of me that still needed them. And that was the difference. I got up, walked to my desk, and opened the drawer. I pulled out the old photograph of me at 12, the boy who didn't yet understand what life had in store. I smiled at the image, then carefully placed the photo back in the drawer. Not to bury the past, but because I had finally written my own ending. The fallout didn't come all at once. It wasn't a single explosive moment. It crept in like a slow, cold fog. First, there were the whispers. People from my hometown, old acquaintances, distant connections, reaching out, some apologetic, others stunned. I never knew. I thought you just left for school. Your parents always said you were difficult. Then the shifts began to show on social media. My parents, who had spent years building their perfect online image, suddenly went silent. Family photos started disappearing from their profiles. The once proud posts about James and Susan were erased. And then, the most telling sign of all, James's entire wedding album vanished from their pages, wiped clean without explanation. Just gone. Later, a quiet LinkedIn update confirmed what I already suspected. James had taken a leave of absence from his job, citing personal matters. I knew it was more than that. Susan followed through with the annulment. She moved in with her brother for a while before eventually returning to her studies. A few weeks later, I received a brief message from her. I'm rebuilding. It's messy, but it's mine. Thank you again. I hope you're doing okay. I wasn't just okay, I was thriving. The nonprofit I had worked with invited me to become a permanent contributor. I took on part-time work, helping to organize outreach for other young adults who had been abandoned by their families. I started writing articles, essays, but most importantly, a book. The manuscript I began to shape carried a working title, The Ghost Son. A question lingered at its core. What becomes of you when those who should love you most choose to erase you from existence? I wasn't writing to settle scores. I was writing for the child I once was, and for all the others like him. Children who slip out of their homes carrying bags they may never open, terrified that even the sound of their own footsteps might be too loud. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from my parents, nor from James. It was from Mrs. Sandra, her familiar looping handwriting stretching across the page with warmth and patience. Dear Richard, I saved your article. Read it twice. Then I clipped it out and pinned it above the desk in my classroom, right where I keep the extra crackers and fruit cups for the kids who come without lunches. Sometimes I tell them your story. Not your name, just what you lived through. That kindness isn't only about reaching out a hand, but also about remembering someone when everyone else has chosen to forget. I'm proud of you. Love, Mrs. V. That letter undid me. Not the restrained tears I was accustomed to hiding, but a flood, raw and unguarded. The kind of release that cracks something open deep inside. For the first time, I wasn't chasing proof. I wasn't a phantom or the discarded son or the shadow lurking outside the frame. I was here, breathing, surviving, living. So when people ask me now what it was like standing before my family and speaking truth into their silence, I just smile. Because the real victory was never in watching them stumble. It was in rising myself, standing whole in the daylight while they clung to their revisions of the night. And I have never once looked back.